scour the internet, grams of yttrium. So forgive me. The flight had a couple of different elements on board. They had some yttrium-50, iridium-192, and some yttrium-90. All of that probably means nothing to you, but what you do need to know is that their cargo was very radioactive. So radioactive, in fact, that they needed about 4,300 pounds of shielding to move 0.83 grams of iridium and 0.0000007 grams of yttrium. Since this stuff was very toxic, and if it were to leak out or, God forbid, explode, then Tennessee would be having a very bad day. Just ask the Soviets with Chernobyl. That is why all of the radioactive materials were housed in DOT Spec 7A containers. In addition to that, they had 6,000 pounds of fuel on board, and that brought their max takeoff weight to 32,411 pounds. The weather at 8:45 p.m. was good. They had 7 miles of visibility, 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 26 degrees Celsius temperature, a 6-knot wind, and some scattered clouds at 25,000 feet. The plane took off from Knoxville as the sun set, and the pilots made their way towards Bristol. As they got near the Tri-Cities Regional Airport, the crew of Flight 409 was cleared for a visual approach to runway 04. The weather was good, so they took the plane into the airport. The airplane was at 5,200 feet and at 250 knots. Everything looked good, and the arrival controller told them to switch over to the tower controller. The arrival controller said, "Will you be able to get down for runway 4? The crew replied with, "No problem." The local controller then cleared Flight 409 to land, quote, "in the blind." This was because the pilots of Flight 409 had not contacted the local controller yet. Then the transmission came in, tag 409 for final for 4. But the controllers knew that something was wrong. The plane was way too high, and one of the controllers said to the other, "Better get on down," as the plane had eaten up a lot of the runway but still had not touched down. The controllers heard something from the plane about getting on the brakes, and then the emergency locator transmitter went off. The Grumman had run off of the end of the runway. The plane went over an embankment and then collided with a chain link fence. This plane that was full of nuclear material then, quote, "exploded and burned." That iridium-192 stuff is nasty. Here's a quote from the CDC. "Exposure to iridium-192 can increase the risk of radiation." If you like the videos that I make, the emergency brake valves were not in the position to port fluid pressure to the emergency brake pressure side of the valve. Also, the emergency brake T-handle was not extended. All of that to say that the captain did not use the emergency brakes for stopping. They just used the normal brakes. Maybe the captain was remembering it wrong, but ultimately this meant that Flight 409 had no chance of stopping on the runway. Also, if you're wondering, yes, these pilots knew that they had nuclear cargo material on board, and they still decided to carry out an unstabilized approach. That basically explains this accident. The pilots doing what they should not have been doing. Now, since we have a bit of time on our hands, how would an airport actually respond to a nuclear accident on its premises? Well, luckily for us, the IAEA and ICAO have an article titled "Preparedness and Response for a Nuclear or Radiological Emergency Involving the Transport of Radioactive Material," which tells you to consider liking and subscribing. But a substantial release of nuclear radiation and heat is never